pretty early on, I decided I didn't want to teach kids. And a lot of that is because of kind of two main reasons. One, I don't particularly have a lot of tolerance for kids, and it's a hassle, right? And like, I know that as a gym owner, I'm leaving a lot of money on the table by not training kids. The other reason, of course, is that you have to change the martial arts. And I don't care what anybody says, it's necessary that you change the martial arts to a certain degree in order to train children. Some of that is their inability to grasp complexity and nuance. And some of that is just material that, let's just say that their powers of restraint are going to be failing them. So you want to make sure that you're doing them a service by not giving them things that are going to be dangerous to their own well-being and success in life. And because of this, I have had to turn many people down, coming to look for classes for their children. I take teens and up, starting at 13 and going up, but I've had to turn people away, right? Because of the whole children thing, I'm just not set up for that. But I do like to follow it up with a recommendation. Where should you go, right? And the answer has always been, look, the best place, if the kids are amenable to it, the best place to start them is going to be in school wrestling. Now, I understand that if you have a girl, that can be challenging because girls are not always going to be, well represented on the wrestling team, which means that they might be the only girl out, if the wrestling team will even take them. So I understand that's not always an option for everybody. But I do think that wrestling is, I think that the evidence has proven out, right, that wrestling is the best foundation, because you're literally talking about body competency and toughness and some general skill and close range skill, which is really important, and general athleticism and stuff like that. And wrestling kind of checks all of those boxes. And then I always tell people, like, look, as a kid, my parents put me in wrestling, and I didn't even make it through a season. I didn't come to enjoy wrestling until I was an adult, until I started doing MMA. And, I just hated wrestling as a grade schooler. And so instead, I got put into Kempo Karate, because I was obsessed with like Van Damme and Chuck Norris, who I grew up watching. And then after that, Power Rangers and Jackie Chan and all of that kind of stuff. So then I will always tell people, like, look, if the kid doesn't want to do wrestling, then sign them up for like a karate or a taekwondo class or something like that. Because again, we're not necessarily worried about the highest level of functionality of real world martial arts or combat sports. What we're looking at is getting them a solid baseline that is fun and engaging, that gives them some just body competency, some athleticism, some toughness, and all of that. Now, look, there are better schools and there are worse schools and everything. But like, something that I say all of the time is that like Shotokan was basically created for children. Like, that's undercutting it a little bit, but not by much. Shotokan was fundamentally created for children. It is children's karate. Now, it's not to say that you cannot turn that into a force to be reckoned with. It is just very stripped down from what traditional Okinawan karate was. And I don't have a problem with Shotokan. I think Shotokan is fine. It's just limited the same way that kickboxing is limited, or the same way that wrestling is limited, or the way that boxing is limited. Every art is limited in its own right, and some more so than others. And usually those limitations are accompanying a certain kind of purpose-builtness for them. And that just is what it is. So, I don't think it is that critical that you get the kid in like the highest tier MMA school, or get them right into a boxing or kickboxing club or anything like that. In fact, I generally tell people to kind of stay away from boxing and kickboxing in the early stages because of brain trauma. you really, really don't want to be exposing kids to a lot of brain trauma. And one of the nice things about like karate and taekwondo is they tend to be low contact, even no contact. I'm not a huge fan of no contact. There's a time and place for it, but I don't think that is the best way, even at the youngest stages, to play. I think you need to have exposure to contact. But the idea behind a lot of karate sparring and taekwondo sparring is you have extremely limited contact to the head or no contact to the head, but then you have light contact to the body. And that is a really great place to start, because you still end up learning like, hey, I don't want to get hit. You still end up learning time and distance and all that stuff. That's really, really good stuff. Now, I would say one aside to my kickboxing will be savate, because modern savate, even though it's much more limited than the historical savate that I prefer these days, modern savate, the assault rules are in fact tailored around the idea of light contact. You're playing a game of tag. You're supposed to be showing a demonstration of skill rather than going for like these kind of gross motor skill knockouts and whatnot. Now, I think for adult and professional competition, that's too weak. However, for training, the day in and day out training, and especially for children, I think that is a fantastic option, because again, you get some light contact, you get to gamify it with the idea of a game of tag, like it's karate tag or kickboxing tag, right? And that's fantastic. Now, look, we live in the US where savate is extremely rare. And that's fine. I got lucky, and that's being like JKD adjacent. I was never in a JKD school, but my second Kempo Sifu was a Danny DeSanto student, and through him we got Professor Salem's savate. And so like there's just kind of a this plus that, get down the line, right? So I got lucky in that sense, and a lot of JKD places will have some savate mixed into it, and usually it's going to be a hybrid of like savate and Muay Thai, or that kind of Southeast Asian style, right? Because early on they were playing with Bando as well, which is just another regional variant. It just depends on whatever the person's background is and all that. But it's really difficult to find savate. So look, I'm not saying that's going to be easy. Anyway, generally speaking, right, the question always comes up then, like how do you train children? Well, now here's the side for me, right? Things are going to change at least a little bit. Now, I'm not ready to jump in and start teaching kids classes, but I've got twins on the way. They're going to be here in about four or 5 months. And at the very least, I'm going to have to be training 2 kids. And that means that I'm going to really have to put into high gear my overall plan, my long-term plan, which is to, look, let's put it in the simplest terms that I can, which is I want my martial arts school to basically be the martial arts equivalent of what Mark Rippetoe has done with starting strength. Now, look, you may love or hate Mark Rippetoe, whatever, right? There are a lot of legitimate criticisms to have about Mark Rippetoe and even the starting strength program. However, I did run the starting strength program early on, and it worked magnificent for me. Not everybody's going to be a high responder to every program, all of that kind of stuff. Not everybody wants to do powerlifting style lifts, so that's not always going to be a plus, right? There's a bunch of different ways. We're not talking about that right now. My main thing though is that I do want to have a baseline platform that can be adopted despite whatever style you're doing, so that you have a starting point that gets people up to competency in a relatively short time frame, which is, look, it's going to be longer than the 3 months it takes to run starting strength. But ideally, let's just ballpark under 2 years. I would like to be able to get people up to that post-novice framework where they could walk into any school and not be lost, right? Not be the best or anything like that, but just not be lost. And I think a good place to start with that is, how would you train children? Because children are automatically going to be in that stripped down level of things, right? You're looking at gross motor patterns, and you're looking at general athleticism, general body structure, stuff that can be built on later. You were looking at the biggest most rough-hewn, most bang for your buck building blocks that will allow them to refine and specialize later. And that is a really important avenue for me. So if nothing else, having my own kids coming through on this is going to be a really, really good test ground for me to kind of build this all in. Now, look, it's going to be a couple years before they can really start training. So I've got a couple years to work through this, but I'm actually taking this as a challenge, not only to help me grow my business and kind of flesh it out to where I want it to be, but just my personal journey as a martial artist and as a teacher. I think it is incredibly important to be able to do these things in a way that will ultimately enhance like the martial arts community, ideally, right? If I ever grow an audience. In the martial arts world, this is a tangent, but in the martial arts world, you get past a point where you're really learning a bunch of new techniques, and you're getting to the point where you're doing a lot of refining of what you do and know, and you're getting to a point where you're looking for things that you can, in a sense, give back to the martial arts community, whether that's through teaching, whether that's through philanthropy or merchandising and improving the gear that we use. There's a lot of different ways that you can work on kind of giving back to the community that brought you up. But that's a major part in your elder years of martial arts that I think a lot of people overlook. And being a teacher is fine, and not every teacher really gives back to the martial arts community. They just help bring up the next generation, but oftentimes they just do things the way that they were taught, and they don't do any, innovation is not even the right word, but they don't do any really refinement of that based on any new scientific evidence, based on their own personal experiences and stuff, which used to be kind of like the standard way to do things, right? You add your own experiences to the way you're taught, and then you kind of go off and you create your own school, and you're not creating a new style, but a new style will often emerge out of it because it's not going to be exactly the same. And you get enough years, enough iterations, or even enough generations down the line, it's going to start being, I don't want to say incompatible with the origin, but it's going to oftentimes be significantly different enough that people will look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a different thing. So anyway, long story short, because I'm just rambling now, is that training children is important, and it's not for every teacher. But if you are in a position where you want to, you need to, or you're going to be faced with teaching children, you have to take some of these things into consideration. It is not the same thing. They're not little adults. Children are children, and their developmental capacity, or rather, their developmental state is not anywhere near the same place as an adult's, and their ability to comprehend complexity and nuance is extremely low resolution and will have to be built up over many, many years. So, long story short, I'm going to eventually have to at least be teaching my own two children, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, I encourage you, if you're looking at stuff like this, consider, if you don't do karate or taekwondo or folk style wrestling or anything like that, consider looking at your art and how you would strip it down to teach, say, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old. Think of how you would do things in a way that gets them to where they need to be, so that when they start becoming, when they start edging up into that provisional adult, late teenager stage, right? That kind of 16 to 18, we're like, hey, you can have a driver's license, but we're going to be watching you. When you start getting into that stage, right, then they can start really grasping some of these more complex things. But before that, you got to play it a little differently. So be considering, right, how you would take your art and do it a little differently for kids, right? And I guess I'm going to shut up now, and I will talk to you guys later. Good journey. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, Check us out on our other socials, and please head over to blacksunboxing.com to get a little more info, including how to contact us. Furthermore, if you are in the Phoenix area, please feel free to stop in, say hi, join in for a class, whatever. Also, if you ever see us cite sources or just for additional content, please check out our Substack. That is where we put all of the sources we use in our videos and is a major part of this. Plus, it serves as a membership platform for long distance learning and for people who would like to support us but aren't local. We would greatly appreciate it if you signed up. Even just the free membership helps us out a lot. All right, I will see you guys in the next video. Good journey.